Bloop. Okay. Oh, my lights flickered. Guys, if I lose my electricity, I will come right back to this space. I can back up internet. I cannot back up electricity. um, so the whiteboard space has a number of different frames. So you can use these arrows and you can go through the frames. So let me put the direct link to this in the chat so you have it, especially if I get kicked off. And what happens, actually, I wonder if I can make one of you a co-host in case I get kicked off. It might just make one of you a co-host if I get kicked off. This is view only. So if you want to participate in the activity, you'll have to head to these triple dots that are in the top right and choose make a copy. And then you will get your own copy of this Jamboard. Jamboard files are part of Google Drive, so it will automatically save to your Google Drive account. Again, so if you follow that link I just put in the chat, it will take you out here, triple dots, make a copy, and then you'll get editing privileges over that copy. The toolbar on the left-hand side, it has markers and drawing tools, has eraser, it has the arrow select tool if you want to move something around, that's how you do that. The sticky note tool will allow you to type text and you can choose a color for it. And then the image tool will allow you to upload an image that you have saved, or you can even go into your Google image search and you can search for, you know, something you want to put on your playground. Although she gives you some, I'll show you, she gives you some pictures to use. Shapes if you want to draw your own, and a text box for non-sticky note text. So text box looks like this. And then a laser pointer. So that's the toolbar, and when you make a copy, you'll be able to manipulate your playground anyway. So now to navigate around this activity, you head to the top center of Jamboard, and you can see there's a whole frame bar here. So you can move from frame to read through the process. So slide 2 is where she presents the problem or the task. You've been hired by Parks and Rec. They want to attract more children to the playground. So you're in charge of designing an exciting playground. Should be fun, should provide exercise for the children. In order to save space, it must be designed, there's a highlighter, so it must be designed as an all-in-one with all parts attached to one frame. So when we're doing this with students, we talked about constraints in the last session. That's one of your constraints when you're designing. Take some time to come up with a theme for this playground. It should be one that is exciting, sturdy, provide exercise, all in one parts. It says the copy and paste playground parts onto your frame. Okay. So on the next one, she provides you, and what you could do with the students would be, maybe they'll tell you what they know about simple machines and you would build that out. She's given you examples here. And she also puts little prompts throughout this lesson. Discuss where you've seen each simple machine on the playground. We're not going to do that right now, but this could be, you know, how you're introducing that to the students. Box and incline plane. Where have you seen that on the playground? Where have you seen a pulley on the playground, or a wedge or a screw or a lever? So you're activating their prior knowledge before they get into that. We're going into slides 4 and 5. She gives you a ton of different parts. Okay, so they're all really cool looking. You can use the select tool to click on that, and once you have it surrounded by that select box, you'll then be able to copy it with your keyboard shortcuts, which would be Control C or Control V. And then here she gives you on slide 6 to copy and paste your piece on there. If that is overwhelming at this point in this digital space, you could just make space on here, and you could just move things or delete things you don't want, and you could just design it right here. So sometimes she does have very elaborate designs in her Jamboard. So you can either drag and drop and move them right here, or if you're comfortable with the copy and paste, you can copy and paste it onto slide 6, which is where she wants you to construct one. Now, she did give you a writing task, which we won't have time for, but what students would end up doing is, what makes your playground special? You have to describe it. You have to sell it. You have to use your argumentative writing skills, your persuasive writing. Why is your design special? What sets it apart? Why would kids enjoy it? What would be fun about it? So they're typing in here, and then she shows you lots of examples. And this is a remix time. So this is actually a whole separate lesson on iteration. So she provides all these really cool examples that she's asking students to then remix. So take these designs on frames 8 through 14, and actually teachers created these in another workshop. And when you make a change, take a sticky note and say what you changed and why, because that's a lot of the iterative process, is really the explanation. So you can see all these designs that teachers created. So that's a separate part of the experience. So you'll have access to this whole thing that you can use at any point once you make a copy of it. For our purposes today, just take a couple minutes, design a playground space based on our challenge, and then we will debrief about the experience, and anyone who wants to share can do that. So again, does anyone need the link to Jamboard or know how to copy it? Need to know how to copy it. Okay, well, I will stop talking. You can get designing, and we'll check back here in a couple of minutes. I'll throw a timer up. All right, so what are your thoughts on how that went? Does anybody want to share what they did? You can grab the screen share. I think it's open for everybody. Don't be shy. You could see me working and struggling through mine. All right, Patty. Oh, it's a playground on the beach. A+.
I didn't get very far. I kind of forgot what you said about keyboard shortcuts for copy and paste, and I was using the 3 dots and duplicating and then couldn't drag it anywhere. But then I remembered, so it's just the beginning.
So my hardest thing was keeping it in one piece. I don't know if anybody else struggled with that constraint, because I wanted the trampoline to be part of it, but then I couldn't think of why I would connect the trampoline to something else. I mean, I guess I could have just put a straight piece, but yeah, I like it. Very good. Thanks for sharing. Anybody else want to share?
Sure, I'll share.
Thank you.
I can't do it while somebody's still on.
Yeah, Paul, or who's this, Patty?
I'm trying to unshare.
There, I did there.
Okay, there we go. I don't know. It was supposed to be a space theme. It's supposed to be like a rocket ship. And...
Yeah. Nice. And did you add that image to your background for the park?
Yeah, I put the park in, yeah.
Yeah, nice. So that was one of the pieces. I didn't emphasize it just in case you hadn't used it, but now in Jamboard you can add custom backgrounds. So she added that.
Yeah, I went on the internet to find the park. So
nice.
Yeah.
I'm putting those keyboard shortcuts in the chat just so you have them. Like, I use those every day, 100 times a day. On a PC, you use the control button and C for copy and V for paste. On a Mac, you use that command key.
mhm.
That comes in handy a lot. Also, in some applications, you can't use a right click for copy paste, like in Google Docs. So I always use that. Awesome. Thank you. Anybody else want to share?
I'll share mine. I don't know if I let my kids go on it, but
safety first.
can everybody should be coming up?
Not yet.
Uh-oh.
There we go.
Crash a meeting. So I didn't change the background. I just dove right into making a giant playset. Does everybody have it?
Yep, we see it. I did that same thing with the rocks and then moving over to something else with the rock wall.
Yeah, I tried to throw as much as possible, and I was the same thing. I wanted to jump off of a trampoline, so I couldn't figure it out. So I just put the octopus tentacles up top.
That was a good idea.
Maybe land somewhere. Not
Yeah.
quite sure where, but
Awesome. Thank you. Any other shares? The other cool thing you can do in a Jamboard is you can download just that frame as a picture. So if you wanted each student to save like a final picture of their work outside the Jamboard file, you could download just that frame as a picture and have it saved that way. I'm not going to break us up to do this. We'll do this all together, but this is something that I have used in the past in some of the engineering sessions that we've done, especially with teachers who maybe aren't well versed in all of the learning that happens through a STEM approach, and they're very focused on their content area. It's a curricular connections brainstorm, and basically after doing an activity like the one we did, and let's assume we did the whole thing and we did the written description and we talked about the persuasiveness of why ours was the best design, and we really looked to include all the types of simple machines in there. This is an activity where you're helping to make curricular connections with the STEM project itself. So in the playground activity, what math skills did you use or would students use with the actual project? What science content was covered? What about technology and engineering? What about literacy? What career connections were there? What success skills, habits, and dispositions? So we would do an activity like the one we did, and then we would just ask teachers to think about all of these different academic skill areas and just start jotting down notes. So for math, what might be something that we used? If you wanted to reference the standards and practices, you could. If you just know them off the top of your head, you would have to write, all right, measurement of distances. You need things like area covered for certain spaces. For science, obviously we did the simple machines, and that's how we would kind of go through that. What other skills, you can just shout them out or you can write them in the chat. Out of any of those academic content areas, what other connections did you see through that playground activity? Any connections?
Well, like literacy, depending on what you were basing it on, you had a story that went with it. Like I said, I try to make it in outer space or something like that.
Oh, yeah. So the setting of the playground space, the presentation skills would be another one when you were doing your arguments. The career connections, I think about you're essentially partnering. Yes, exactly, Paul. That's what I was going to write. You're partnering with Parks and Rec. So that's the organization that's spearheading this. So you have to learn how to partner with an organization like that. For engineering, prototyping, design. How many of you put something somewhere, but then you dragged and dropped it somewhere else because it just didn't make sense the first time? So that was all part of the prototyping process. Creativity with space, keyboard shortcuts. For those in here. Yeah, and even if you've never used a Jamboard, just trying that for the first time as it was a new piece. Definitely the creative thinking aspect for the disposition. Anything else? Description component. So that is something that if you are, like I said, if you're pushing out the STEM approach and you're really trying to incorporate it into spaces where it currently might not be, just giving them that overarching look at, okay, you're very dedicated to your content, your curriculum, and that's a standards-based approach. And STEM allows you to bring those standards to life through different ways, and safety considerations too, spacing, area spacing. All right, so that's there for you. We're going to look through different examples. Some of these will be perfect fits for what you're doing with students and teachers in your buildings. Others might be a higher or lower grade level, but I tried to include a variety of things, or things that could be tweaked to fit the grade level or levels that you work with. So the first exploration is through STEM and ELA. I don't know if you've seen the books Iggy Peck, Architect, and Rosie Revere, Engineer. Andrea Beatty has written these. I just love, first of all, that there are female STEM leads in the books, which are really important. And they're picture books. And I will continue to say that all students love picture books, even middle schoolers and high schoolers. So this is a book, Rosie Revere, Engineer, and there, after you do the read aloud, there are opportunities to then build, create, and design. So this is just a simple idea of, and some of you mentioned this in the last session, how students read a book, the storybook, and then they did a STEM-based activity with that book. So just making those connections. There's a bajillion examples out there. This is an example. It's a full-fledged, if you're looking for something pre-made, ready to go, this is a designer, a teacher, her name's Carly, and their company's Carly and Adam. But she has everything standards-based mapped out, aligned to Common Core and Next Gen. There's a whole materials list for you. And you can see this is more primary based, definitely elementary based, but there's also things like vocabulary that you can use. There's some cutouts for Rosie Revere and anything that you might need. There's a STEM journal attached. So I see a comment coming in. So this is kind of ready to go. Picture perfect STEM, I'm not, but is it something like they show you a picture and then you pull out the STEM elements like a photo? I'm not, you can, if you have a link to it, or you can grab the mic and you can share. And I like about this, oh, chapter books with the characters now too. Oh, questionnaires. That sounds nice. Yeah. So we've seen some of this and we're going to see more of it. I think, we talked about that emphasis on STEM. We're going to see more connections with literacy and STEM for sure. But what I liked about this, and the reason I wanted to share, is that it's ready to go. So if you have a teacher who's like, oh, I feel like it's a good idea, but it's so much work to prep, or I don't have all the materials, or I don't really have a STEM journal, or what do I do? Everything is there. So I wanted to share that one. And in a similar kind of space, Storytime STEM packs. Now, one of the IUs, I believe it's IU3, they are the creator of the Storytime STEM packs, and these are available for purchase. They're primary early elementary focused. There's always a picture book that is the focus point of the experience. And then there is hands-on learning, and they say with low prep time that's involved. I'm running a session about, or Danielle from our office is running a session about these at the summer conference that we're doing. And your organizations have asked us to provide, what are some possible purchases? If you get to the point where you're starting to build up your STEM library, this might be something you want to consider. And there's lots of different titles. There's lots of different focus areas: computer science, math. They have multi-sets, they have pre-K sets, engineering and design. Of course, if you're familiar with any of the PBS stuff, PEG and CAT is very much math and science focused. So they give you the grades here, and then they give you the contents that would be for like one class. So there's consumables that if your students use through them, you would have to add again every year, just like a science kit. But I love that idea of this, for example, this is all about Kandinsky and art. So not only could your ELA teacher get involved, your reading teacher, but now you have that opportunity to link up with your art teacher who might do an extension activity about Kandinsky, or, just kind of work through some of those pieces. So those are Storytime STEM packs. And I'm going to actually, I knocked over my pens earlier, if you heard that, but I want to do that. I'm going to write down that questionnaires because I always like to give lots of choices. Okay. One of the other pieces that we had looked at for a connection of ELA and STEM is this whole idea of prototypes versus perfected works. Now, I love writing. I write even when I don't have to write, and I've always been a writer. And one thing that I'm really passionate about with kids and writing instruction is that they understand that it's okay not to write to a specific model all of the time. I think we do a disservice to kids as writers when we force them into boxes like the 5-paragraph essay or OOTS or whatever it is we're forcing them to do. I think if we show them that and model that, it's great, but we have to get them to a place where they're comfortable kind of veering off as writers themselves and letting the writing do the guide. And that's where the writing process greatly mirrors the design process and helping them think about their prototypes in writing versus their perfected works. And perfected is a tough word if you drill it down to perfect, because of course none of us do perfect work. But a prototype is created quickly, inexpensively. And the reason we do a prototype is we're trying to clarify our thinking. We're trying to explore ideas. That's why we do a rough draft, because we're trying to get everything out there. We're trying to experiment with how we want it to go. And it's made for us, by us, for us. We use our prototypes to further our thinking. We use our rough drafts to further our next piece of writing, or we use it for each other as peers to learn from one another. Perfected works require time and talent and specialized materials and resources. They're created by makers for authentic audiences. And lots of times we ask kids to write in class, and the only people who see the writing is the teacher, aside from that student. And so in that instance, can we really ask them to give us a perfected work if there's no element of that publishing piece of the authentic audience? And so that's a really interesting, as your students are getting older and developing as writers, why do I need to do this again? Why do I need to rewrite this? This is the best it can be. Is it the best prototype that you're coming up with, or is there another purpose? Do we need to get it to perfected work stage? And every writing task is different. And sometimes we don't need it to be perfected work. And so that's why it's really important to understand this prototyping process. Sometimes we write to get better at writing. Sometimes we write to produce a finished product that we want to share with someone else. So the idea of novel engineers came up in our last session, and the novel engineering project is kind of that approach of taking an engineering aspect with a literacy. It comes out of Tufts University. I linked here to a teacher who shared her resources for the Odyssey. So it's obviously upper grades. And so they're going to use the graphic novel, The Odyssey, as a basis for an engineering design challenge where they're tasked with helping save Odysseus. And the text pieces, they're identifying problems, brainstorming. This is 9 through 12. The standards are here. The teacher listed, so they're not reading the actual Odyssey, they're using the graphic novel, which is way easier to comprehend and enjoy, probably. And you can see how they're working through their problems and their projects. She's got a video, and you can learn more about novel engineering here. So they're reading books, and in that they're identifying problems, they're scoping those problems, brainstorming solutions. This is the design process that we're accustomed to, that engineering design process, getting feedback, improving their designs, and sharing. Again, shout out to companies and corporations that are supporting her work here. And if you were interested, if this is something that you might do with your upper grade students, this is an example of a graphic organizer in Google Docs. And it has everybody, you know, she maps out the chapters and the books and everything you need, identifying the problems, character conflicts, what kind of conflict. Of course, they learn that. Defining problems. So everything's mapped out. It's a really clear and easy to understand piece. And on her website, she has a lot more examples of the types of novel engineering they're doing, and just other student programming here. So that's from the STEAM, that's Lit STEAM. So they've got examples for elementary as well, Guardians of the Gorillas, Penguin Patrol, A Little Red Book Walk, and then this is where I pulled that from. And if you're using Finch robots or Hummingbird kits, Finch for CS for littles. So those are, you know, that is something that if you have an English teacher who has traditionally been teaching novels, and has been doing that for a long time. This is something where you could bring that in a way to make that whole experience more engaging for students and tied to STEM. On a less whole novel approach, we have the fire starters. So fire starters are writing and building challenges that promote critical thinking, and there are creative constraints involved, so which forces that innovative thinking aspect. So the teacher can put together just everyday material. So there's not a whole lot of purchasing involved. You can see there's toothpicks, there's little cups, there's scissors, there's binder clips. In this picture, there's what looks like pipe cleaners, paper plates, and things like that. How might you use the materials in this bucket to build a place where an alien might spend time? So that's not a typical thought that we have in our day, which is what kind of spins that creative thinking and the literary elements there. This was for teachers in a professional development session. Which stories do your students need to hear? How might you use these materials to build their central messages? So the key elements in these fire starter challenges are kind of big picture thoughts, and you're building as you're writing. So an example challenge might be here, a prompt aligned to your learning target. How might you build something to reveal how the character's actions in your story reinforce your theme? And then you list the materials they need. Loose parts is a big theme in a lot of STEM building, where you're just giving them essentially exactly what it says, loose parts, and they have to build something constructive out of it. The time limits, while they can be stressful, they do create a sense of urgency and a sense of focus. So the fire challenge has a time limit, sometimes as short as 5 minutes. And then purposeful collaboration. Describe how your build will help your intended audience. Angela Stockman is the creator of the Fire Starters. She has a website that you can visit, and also has created this slide deck for people new to Fire Starters. And you can go through this, and she walks you through the guidelines, what loose parts are. It's materials that can be moved, carried, combined, redesigned, lifted up, taken apart, and put back together in multiple ways. How much time should we do? Do they have to be independent? So these are all the Q&A. And then in the rest of her session, she has the invitation and the narrative writing and all the different types of writing. She's even got a picture. Sometimes kids like to see, what am I talking about here? Like, what are you doing? And here's an example of students in action. So all of the literary devices, now we're into informational writing. So you're looking at all your different modes that students are learning about. This is a gold mine of a resource that you can use, which is great. All right, so love those fire starters. And she has also shared 5 ways makers move to writing. So I know that in a lot of orgs, makerspace is an emphasis. So we're looking at, okay, the discovery process, the hands-on, when we're building, how does it help us define and detail, dissect our book or break down our topic? And did it make us think differently about the experience as we were making? This slide has lots of other ELA ideas. Some of them are tied to materials or equipment. So if any of you have access to things like Wonder Workshop Dash robots, they have specific lessons tied to ELA standards. You can search through their lessons online, and you can find those here. This is an example of one, how Dash would help with haiku writing. If you have Spheros in your organization, they're little codable balls. They have spelling activities, and using Scratch, there's just a ton of storytelling you can do. Character development, plot development. You can retell a story with Scratch, and it's all student design based. When it comes to ELA integration, again, the argumentative pieces, the justification of your findings, the evidence-based writing, all of that is really important. The research piece, even things like searching for research to support your ideas, doing those, as lots of you know, in the library fields, what good searching looks like online, and those presentation skills. So any questions about STEM and ELA connections, specific things you're looking for, or anything else you need or wonder in that space for ELA? Or anything you're already doing and you want to share it with the group, feel free to add it to the chat too.
Hi, Lynn. This is Tara from DuBois Central Catholic. I'm the one that mentioned about novel engineering. We are able to get a part-time STEM integrator for next year. And I felt that that was a really important piece for our elementary. So, because a lot of teachers feel like we've taken a lot on this year, how do I integrate it? I'm not a STEM teacher. So I put the huge link in the discussion from Amazon, the Picture Perfect STEM. They have it broken down to K through 2 and then 3 through 5. They even have like STEM science elementary base. Like we just got that book, the grouping of the 3 books. And that's kind of the basis of what I'm planning for our new STEM integrator to do is to, integrate the literary schools, the teacher, have her introduce the books, have the STEM integrator like work with the individual teachers on then the activities, like everything is in these books.
Right.
There's worksheets. There's even like a virtual component. So if you do have to continue with what we have this year and we have kids still at home virtually, you can include them in what is taking place with this Perfect Picture STEM. I haven't even had a chance to like dive into the books yet. They're super thick. I mean, there's a lot there, and I'm really excited that we're going in that direction to get that cross curricular. Like you said, it's not just go to a STEM class. We're really trying to incorporate it into, the library skills and English skills and math skills and across the board. And this kind of was a no-brainer for me looking at this for the elementary end of our instruction. So I just kind of wanted to share that and let everyone see it.
Yeah, thank you for doing that. And it's NSTA is the press. I mean, so you're getting good science-based activities. You're not just getting fluff if it's coming from NSTA. So that's probably why it's a little pricier, because it's like it's probably like a textbook size type thing the way you're describing it. So yeah, so she's gonna pull it. Yeah, so it's a big one. Yeah. But having what you'll need obviously is the time to go through. Once you get ideas like that, it's just it's a matter of alignment at that point. And who knows, your literary teachers might find books they like better than the ones they're currently doing, which is always like a cool aha moment when they're like, oh, I don't have to keep teaching the same book I've done for 20 years or whatever.
The K through 2 book has over 300 pages to it. And so I think the 3 through 5 is even larger. It looks like it's larger. And then the one that's just the science, Picture Perfect Science STEM is probably about the same size as this one. I mean, they're big books.
Yeah.
I was really impressed when they came in, and then in looking at the material, like it's all there. Like it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, you can sample the first chapter. Yeah, so it really, and so we're doing a lot of stuff this year, doing more book study type things with groups of teachers from a professional development standpoint. So I know PLCs are big in your org. This might be that perfect opportunity to build in something like this in your PLC, where you're having groups of teachers work through, figure out, and there's Rosie Revere. And yeah, this is great. Thanks for sharing that. Any other feedback or questions on the ELA connections? All right. Oh, we got another message. Yeah, so that's if you have books that may lend themselves to an integrated STEM approach, you might want to, you can look for them rather than, like you said, purchase new ones. it's always a little bit of, we're so excited about this, but now we need all this stuff. That's always a harder sell for principals, but it's not impossible. All right, so let's talk about math. So it seems weird to say, okay, STEM and math, since M is math in STEM, but these are just a couple of reinforcing ideas about the practices of math. And I know that is a focus of your group this year, and Josh spoke to the importance of the mathematical practices where students are modeling with math, they're using the right tools at the right time in the right ways. Look for and make use of structure, look for and express regularity and reasoning. So these practices can be found across the board when you're working through STEM approaches. And the habits of mind, of course, are just trying to make sense of the problems and persevere. The perseverance is not something that we can really teach so much as it is we can encourage it and provide space for it. I'll speak to just the kids that I've known in my classes. And again, some kids were very willing to take risks. I think the more our emphasis has been on academic performance above all else, we've seen kids really pull back and they're very afraid to do things outside the box. So we kind of have to give them permission sometimes to persevere and think differently. And it is important to be precise, especially with mathematics, but it's also okay, like we were talking earlier, to fail and fail forward. So this is just another look at that. What can I do? I can, I like the I can statements because those are always so approachable for students. I can use numbers and words to make sense of problems. I can be precise. I can see and understand how numbers and shapes are organized. I notice when calculations are repeated. I recognize math in everyday life. That's a big connection with STEM as well. So there are a couple of tools out there that are very helpful in terms of planning to strategize with your math teachers. And I'm considering you all in this realm of program curriculum developers, even if that's not your official title. I feel like your influence is in this space if you're trying to have a STEM approach. And so when you are looking at your math programming, look for opportunities to integrate science, tech, engineering in meaningful ways. If STEM activities don't fully address grade level appropriate standards in math, and this is what Josh was speaking to earlier, look for ways that the activities can support the overall development of problem solving, critical thinking, and curiosity. When assessing STEM learning, recognize the unique nature of integrative STEM or use or develop authentic assessment tools that look at connections and address problems integrating STEM disciplines. That focus on always needing the right answer for full credit is problematic in a STEM space because we're really focused on the process and the steps that were taken. We want kids to show their work, of course, and that's really where we dive into things like debugging and finding mistakes. But the assessment strategies, the kind of emphasis we place on academically the right answer, that should shift in the STEM experimentation space. I am a huge advocate of open middle. Open middle, and I'll have to share this funny story about my son who's 8. Last year when schools closed down, he was in first grade. And so I thought, well, I'm going to give him some problem solving things to do. He'll love it being at home doing that. So I pulled out some open middle problems because they're not straightforward. They're not open-ended. You look at it, it's not 5 times 2 is what, it's very much open versions of, I wonder if I have to download it, if I can just see some questions and problems and parts unknown. So things like Lucy has some apples, she's got 9 blank. How many apples does she have? So thinking through that piece, and it's a lot more, and you can share these problems. They have them all across the board. I think it's free. It's still free. I think you have to make an account to see kind of everything. So I would give him something like this. use the digits 1 through 9 at most one time each and fill in the boxes and make a product to as close to 7,000 as possible. And these are just fun things where kids are like, oh. And at first it was very frustrating for him because he was just used to doing math. He was just used to following the steps, and the thinking part of it was a little much of a struggle. So I love open math, and definitely share that with your math teachers because there are a lot of connections you can make to the STEM spaces. Again, I always link to Wonder Workshop stuff. There's countless things you can do with measurements, area, spaces for Dash to travel. You're coding him to move in certain directions. You're coding him to move at certain speeds and measuring that. And that's a cool connection to the math spaces. And I'm also a huge proponent of 3-act math. So 3-act math is the creation of Dan Meyer. Dan Meyer is a former high school teacher of math who now works for Desmos, if you're familiar with that company, which offers interactive online math experiences. So 3-act math is essentially, there's a question and there's a provocative type of situation that students are trying to solve. So let's go into closer to the pin. So this is like a one last 20-second. Watch it. All right, which ball is closest to the hole? I can't tell by looking at that. Write down a guess. That's act 1. All right. So, and he does say this task is part of the warm up for a larger geometry lesson about calculating distance between 2 points. All right. So now we've got a grid involved. What information would be useful to figure this out? Knowing our math practices, we need to know what tools to use. Write down some questions you have in your head right now. All right. Let's see. Act 3. Ooh, that's cool. All right. So these are the 3 acts. You know, we have this problem, we question, we plan out how we're going to solve it, and then it's revealed. There are materials for teachers to use where you can get kind of talking points and everything you need. It's all saved in Google Drive, and you can see it's up by act. So when I'm in act 3, there's the video. We've got other things that we can use in there. I don't think, no, maybe they're all video based for that one. And they have all these different grade levels and the, you know, like all the way up through calculus. And so here in this post, if you're new to 3-act math, Dan, this is back in 2011, talks about what it is. So you introduce the central conflict. You might have a picture or you might have a video. This is one of the ones I first remember seeing. Act 2, you look for overcoming obstacles, resources, and tools. And Act 3, resolve. And you might even set up a sequel to move on to the next space. And so 3-act math brings that whole third dimension to math. If we're looking to make math a more project-based environment, this is a hard sell with most of the math teachers I've worked with at the secondary level, for sure, because they're very content focused. I also know a lot of teachers who are convinced that kids cannot learn math in a way that is exploratory. They feel that they have to show the kids how to do the problems first before they could be successful at it. But what we're finding is that when we give kids problems to solve and we don't tell them how to solve them, they are able to formulate with a lot of success the best strategies to do that. What does PBL look like in a math classroom? This is an example project. London Bridge is falling down. So it's middle school math. Wants students to understand geometry is more than just memorizing the names of shapes and formulas, which is how I learned a lot of geometry, which is why I did so poorly in 10th grade geometry with proofs, like so poorly, because I didn't understand the concepts behind it. Students will design a bridge using an online program like bridgedesigner.org, or they could create a scale model, and there's going to be a station rotation model, and group the kids to do it individually. So that's all their London Bridges. And even things like, these are some other from Mathalicious, which is now Citizen Math, connecting math learning to authentic, relevant situations. So things that are happening in the world. That's what citizen math is all about. So if you're working with math teachers, if you're looking to bring STEM in, these are some resources that you could turn to. Okay. Any math feedback, questions, things you're doing currently in math that's going really well? All right, let's dive into the arts. All right, so I love STEM, STEAM for sure. And art is just a natural partner to STEM because beauty and art in STEM are very kind of obvious once you start to look for it. So science is about exploring the beauty in the world, and technology requires thoughtful design and artistic presentations. You know, in a technology company like Apple, which strives to make very beautiful looking things that are functional, there are artistic designers involved. There is art in what they do. Every design of a user experience, every website you visit, there is an art designer behind that because they have to keep that in mind. Engineering is about beautiful functional designs, and math, of course, is so pattern based, patterns and shapes that are pleasing to the eye. So where do we connect art and STEM? In lots of our lessons about colors, light, shapes, dimensions. Those are natural connections that we can look to. But even in the sophisticated spaces of art, like critique and evaluation, and how art makes us feel, that empathy piece in the design space, understanding and evaluating how the arts convey meaning. There are lessons tied to some of the specific robotics that we use for art. There are art standards that support STEM concepts. The ultimate list of STEAM art lessons and STEM art projects. If your art teachers are looking for a way to get started with that, please reference any of those resources to dive deeper. And I even love this. If your schools are using home economics, and we used to call it that, but I bet they call it family consumer science now. It can exist as a STEM course. You are building every day in family consumer science and designing and creating. It's one of the biggest STEM spaces there is. So those are some art spaces. Music, of course, has lots of natural connections to science simply because of sound, vibrations, waves. Creating musical instruments is one of the first things that elementary students can do to really wrap their heads around sound, and understanding how the different lengths of the pipes in this flute make different sounds based on how long they are and why do they do that. What's the science behind that? So there's lots of making music challenges, exploring the science of sound and music. When students are able to express themselves musically, they are fulfilling a lot of those dispositions of STEM and skill sets of STEM that we're interested in developing in them. Logical thought, freedom of expression, of course, attention to detail, increasing that attention, and the memory recall, the muscle memory that it takes to be a musician. So there's lots of options there. For a digital experience, I do like the Chrome Music Lab. There is a lot of ways that kids can play around with their arpeggios, and they can change the key. So now if I'm a music teacher and my kids don't have access to keyboards at every moment, they have access to this. So we can change it. We got the harp here. We can have the metronome on too. So there's fun stuff there. I love the music lab. If you teach, there's just so much going on here. So here for right away, I can see the connection with the wavelengths of the sound wavelengths. So definitely share this with your teachers, either your music teachers or your science teachers who teach light, sound, energy, waves, all that kind of good stuff, because that is a fun time. You could spend the whole day there. I added physical education to the arts, of course. This has a lot of opportunities. Your phys ed teachers and your health teachers, they are helping kids understand distances, movements, the way that the body works in certain types of STEM related spaces. I love this idea of the kids actually building, constructing, engineering activities for phys ed class, or maybe it's like a carnival or some kind of special event that they're designing for. And so that was the Maker Gym, they called it. So there's a whole post there talking about how you could get kids, what kind of materials you might provide for them to build out a Maker Gym. Other connections, depending on the grade level, designing and using map software to build things like 5K routes. Maybe they are doing a full project-based experience where they're advertising an event, they're trying to get registrants, they're having sponsors, and they're fundraising for a cause with that race. Designing a new machine, an exercise machine. This is Sphero activities. Creating target games, push and pull concepts, forces, of course, in phys ed is a great connection. And on the health aspect of it, healthy eating, planting a garden, designing technology to water and care for that garden. There's really a lot that you can do to incorporate health and physical education in STEM as well. And I mean, phys ed has taken such a different role than it did even 10 years ago, where it's less on learning how to play different games, and it's more about the science of your body, how it can move, how you can take care of it, and then getting to experience a lot of fun things while you're doing that. So that's definitely a critical aspect for physical education. So what questions do you have or things you want to add for the arts? Anything you have done or seen that's worked really well in those spaces that you'd like to share? All right, well then our last exploration is STEM and the social sciences. So lots of schools have social studies as a class at the elementary level. Sometimes middle and upper break it up into disciplines. You might have a geography class, you might have history across different eras. So it depends on how you're structured, what types of resources you might need or look for. But certainly from a historical perspective, STEM is not new. So there have been engineers, even before they were called engineers, from the beginning of time, who have been innovating and creating and designing to make life better and to solve problems. And you can ask kids, what do you think the first engineering design was, and see what they come up with. Things that relate, and I saw somebody mention this in the first session, an activity all about pyramids. So if you're studying ancient Egypt and you need to get into STEM, there's nothing better than to just look for that natural connections about the pyramids, how they were built, what the dimensions would be like. So you have all of that volume type of calculations for math, how much the stone weighed, how you'd have to move it. That's a deep layered exploration that goes so much farther than just, the Egyptians built pyramids. And then how would this is the empathy piece, if you were students and you were living then, given the tools that you had then, because you certainly don't have the tools that you have now, how would you have approached solving those problems? So they're going to have to take that perspective of living in that time, identify the problems, design solutions, and then build prototypes, and even building it out to something like a social studies fair. So diving into the history of engineering, the history of problem solving is a wonder. There's lots of other connections, of course, map skills, directions, grid systems, coordinate planes, all of the connections to civics, financial literacy, economics, data analysis, technology through the ages is always a really interesting exploration. And as we see cross-curricularly, research, presentation skills, let's say it all the time, research, presentation skills, communication skills. There's a huge collection of PBL activities for social studies classes linked here, and a STEM and social studies, that's a great read. For Dash or any of the robots that move. Maybe you've seen B-bots for the younger children or Blue bots. These bots are able to be programmed without any other devices. Students use the directional arrow buttons on the B-bots, and they're not really that expensive either if you're shopping for your spaces. And you can use mats or you can use chart paper on the floor, and you can have students design the movement of the bot based on whatever social studies task you're looking into. For example, this is the United Kingdom, and you need to plan a journey for the B-bot. Write an algorithm using commands that is going to move that B-bot where you would like him to go for your journey. And then you work through the whole debugging program and everything like that. I'm going to share Paula's insight here. In a past life, I used a spinoff idea of the show Chopped. It was a great program, fun. Oh yeah, so that would be like presenting the ingredients and then create something out of that. Is there anything more STEM based than like Top Chef or some of those where they have to build even like, well, there's so many of those programs now, but like Lego Masters is like that. You're given a task, you're given constraints, you're given materials, and you go. It's so cool. Oh yeah, Shark Tank, it would be great too. The Shark Tank element in any of this, when you have to pull in the marketing piece, even for the playground activity, you could turn that into the last piece is you selling it. You need to sell your creation. All right. So we have the rest of the time is yours for exploration, because I know there was a lot of links inside these slides that you might want to dive deeper into. But if you want to take some time and reflect with the group and share in the chat, one content area you are going to focus on working first, see if there's something you want to dive deeper into. Go ahead and share that in the chat, and I'll open it up to the group for any comments or questions or anything you want to see more in depth. Oh yes, and I will definitely put the slides back in. Any comments, questions? All right.
Just wanted to-
Oh
is it
yeah, go
okay?
ahead.
My science teacher and our math teacher in 8th grade got together along with myself in technology, and they had a project that lasted probably for at least a month, if not a quarter, where the science teacher had the children design a bridge, and they had to put down how much they used, and they were charged so much per piece of whatever it was that they used. And so the math teacher had them calculating how much they used, and I was helping them with different things because they had to have a company and a business card, and they went all out because they also had to have a billboard, and some of that stuff was on technology. And then they went with the team that won was the one that had the best bridge for the least amount of money spent. So it was very involved, but the kids loved it.
So the time thing is important, because whenever we share about PBL, the first thing that teachers get very uncomfortable with is this idea of something lasting for weeks. Because if you really truly are doing a project-based learning endeavor, it is rarely a couple of days or a week long. It is in depth, and it could last. There are PBL projects that last months. Now, that's not the only thing kids are doing during that time, but it is something that you need that commitment. And it's hard sometimes for teachers to say, if I devote all this time to this one project, what am I losing? What what am I not going to get to cover? Because we always have that fear that we're not covering all of the things we need to cover. But in reality, when they're learning in this way, they're uncovering learning in ways that we really didn't think we could do. But they're doing it. And you figure out that through PBL, for the bridge example, if someone's trying to do that calculation of the cost of the bridge materials and they're having trouble, well, now we're here to support you in the math space. And that's that we're giving you that direct support with math. Or if you're having trouble with the design and the engineering aspect, now we're here to support you in that. So it is a lot of work to prep and prepare that planning aspect. But I think once we do that, just the benefits are just immense on the end. Yeah, everybody really shared a lot of great stuff. So thank you for doing that. And definitely keep doing that with each other. I don't know if you all get to connect very often, but hopefully you do or can in the future, because it's nice to have other people who aren't at your building and come together and share ideas about what you're doing in those common spaces. So I'd encourage you to do that if you don't currently have the opportunity to.